Thank you very much. And Steve, now it's your turn. Are you going to repeat the mistake of the history?
It's 10 a.m., approximately, on September 15th, 2008. In the geniuses, all the brilliant people we hear so much about, the party of Davos, the city of London, Wall Street, all of these geniuses have decided the United States government, for a host of reasons, that are going to kick Lehman Brothers into bankruptcy. The smartest guys in the room didn't understand something, that putting into bankruptcy, not understanding how Lehman Brothers was so central to the world's capital markets, would start a string of events that would ultimately lead to the election of Donald J. Trump as 45th President of the United States. 3 days later, on the 18th, Secretary of the Treasury Hank Paulson, former chairman of Goldman Sachs, a guy I used to work for as a young investment banker, and Ben Bernanke, the head of the Federal Reserve, went to the Oval Office, told George Bush, we need $1 trillion in cash, and we need it by 5 o'clock today, or the American financial system is going to implode. George Bush took a very courageous act. He says, hey, the White House counsels looked at the Constitution. I don't think I can solve this. You have to go to Capitol Hill. So they went up and saw Nancy Pelosi and the leaders of the House and the Senate, and they made a plea. We know this later from public records and the investigations that took place of how we had the worst financial meltdown in the history of mankind. We know that they said we need $1 trillion. And the American financial system, if we don't get it, will melt down in 72 hours. And the world's financial system will implode in 2 weeks, and we will have global anarchy. Now, the elites of the city of London and Frankfurt and Wall Street and Tokyo brought that crisis on. They did something to the West and to the United States in particular that our worst enemies hadn't done. Kaiser Wilhelm, the military junta in Japan, Mussolini, Hitler, Mao Zedong, the Bolsheviks, the communists. By our own hand, we virtually destroyed ourselves. Now, what's good to know is that the elites, the globalists, they took a very courageous move. You know what they did? They saved themselves. They saved themselves and let the little guy pay for it. They saved themselves and let the devil catch the hindmost. Bush, Paulson, Bernanke, and later the most progressive Democratic president in the history of the United States, Barack Hussein Obama, took the Federal Reserve's balance sheet from $880 billion to $4.5 trillion. The 10-year anniversary is coming up in September. And if you've owned intellectual property, if you've owned assets, if you own real estate, you own stocks, you've had the greatest 10-year run in history. You think these hedge fund guys are so rich because they're smart? They inflated their way out of here. And you know who paid for it? People making $45,000 a year. People that have not had a wage increase since 1970. The concentration of wealth in America in the West is obscene. It's an obscenity. And I don't want to hear all the progressive left chatter and all this talk. The Democratic Party, like the Republican Party, is bought and paid for by Wall Street. And you need no other evidence than had they bailed themselves out. In the United States, you have socialism for the very poor and for the very wealthy. And you have a brutal form of capitalism for everybody else. That incident in 2008 lit the match of the great revolt that we've seen across the industrial West, ending with the election of Donald Trump. In 2010, the reaction to this caused the rise of the Tea Party. Remember the Tea Party? That was kind of a populist self-organizing mechanism. It won, with no money, it won 62 seats or 63 seats in the 2010 election, the biggest victory in the House of Representatives since the Great Depression. Later, Mitt Romney did not reach out to the Tea Party. Mitt Romney wanted nothing to do with the populist movement or the working class in the Republican Party. And Mitt Romney, who was so sure they were going to win, Paul Singer and the Kochs, all of them up there at the Ritz Hotel in Boston on election night, were absolutely gobsmacked when they lost to President Obama, and lost badly to President Obama. And the solution for that, the Republican Party put out an autopsy. The solution for that was going to be open borders and amnesty that they had not played to the Hispanic members of the United States population. But there was another set of data by a guy named Sean Trendy at Real Clear Politics. And in 2013, I sat down with Jeff Sessions at the Breitbart Embassy, and we kind of walked through a potential battle plan. And what it showed is that working class people, blacks, Hispanics, and whites, had not shown up for Mitt Romney because he represented Wall Street. He did not speak to their needs. The economic conditions for the working class were getting worse. Do you know today in the United States of America, when we had these hurricanes that hit last year, 50% of the families in our country don't have $400 in cash for an emergency. I think the average net worth in our country is $10,000, right? If you back out the home equity in your house. Whereas the concentration of wealth, the top 1% own today 44% of the wealth. And I think the top 10% own 98% of the wealth. There's something like 160 million families that literally have, 160 million people that have no cash in the bank. The people at Walmart will tell you that the bulk of the working class live paycheck to paycheck. Well, I got news for you. The bulk of the middle class live paycheck to paycheck. People with middle class salaries are 1 or 2 paychecks away from oblivion. How did we get here? We got here because we've allowed a global elite to call the shots, and that's the backbone of the populist movement. In 2014, we had another surge election based upon the same principles of populism. The Republicans picked up more votes. We had an eye-opener. I personally had an eye-opener as I watched a more professional version of the Tea Party in England, led by Nigel Farage. In the European elections in May of 2014, I saw a party of populism pick up seats in the European Parliament and saw the techniques that they used to excite people. And I realized that in Europe, the populist movement was ahead of the United States. In 2015, Donald Trump comes down the escalator. He was number 7 at the top of the escalator, but that evening he was number 1. Because besides what Lanny talks about in his 1 hour and 15-minute speech that kicked him off as a candidate, he talked about things that no one had talked about things that Senator Sessions and I talked about. Number 1, take trade from number 100 as an issue and bring it down to number 2. Take immigration as number 3 or 4 and bring it to number 1. Because trade and illegal immigration are 2 sides of the same coin. Trade is just unfair competition for your skilled workers by cheaper manufacturing, lower wages, and inhumane conditions in other countries. And illegal immigration, mass illegal immigration, is an unlimited pool of labor to compete against black and Hispanic working class. And with those 2 issues that Republicans have never talked about, because the high church theology of the Republican Party is free trade, free trade, free trade. A radical idea that nobody has ever fully implemented except the United States against a mercantilist rival that we'll get to in a second. Also in 2015, with the rise of Donald Trump, the arrogance of one of the most destructive politicians in the 21st century, Angela Merkel of Germany, decides on her own to allow 2 million Syrian refugees or migrants into Europe. A event that they admit today was very stupid. In 2016, we had Brexit. And all the great geniuses and all the media in the United States, on the night of Brexit, we had a crew over the night of Brexit. CNN had so little understanding of the issues, so little understanding of where the British people were, that they had to get on TV and to get people that were calling him Nigel Farage. They had no concept of what was going on. In fact, a small anecdote, Nigel actually conceded after a couple of beers, or early in the morning, they had a flashing that Nigel had conceded. We called Nigel and said, and talked to Raheem Bassam and said, chill out. The Midlands Labour vote has not come in, and that vote is going to go to leave. And it did. And then what? 5 or 6 months later, Donald Trump wins the presidency. When I came into the campaign of Trump in mid-August, Trump was down 16 points, double digits down in most of the battleground states. Not a lot of organization, not a tremendous amount of money. When I talked to candidate Trump, I said, forget all those numbers. Forget 16 down. Forget all the double digits down. It's not relevant. There's only two things that are relevant. 2/3, 1/3. Two-thirds of our countrymen still think the country's on the wrong track. The same number that existed when Barack Obama won the presidency. They like Obama personally, but they do not believe he delivered the change the country needs. The more important number is from Pat Cadell, longtime Democratic pollster to Jimmy Carter. His analysis showed for the first time in American history, 75% of our countrymen believe America's in decline. And when you look at the crosstabs, the working class and the lower middle class are the two classes that are not prepared to accept that. And they will back a leader that will return America to its former glory. And yes, make America great again. So from August 14th on, it's very simple. We're going to compare and contrast. We're going to hold her up, Hillary Rodham Clinton, who's been running for president of the United States since she was 6 years old, right? That's all they think about. She's ambitious as Lucifer. And I say that in recognition of Milton. But she's the guardian of an incompetent and corrupt establishment, the party of Davos, that have gotten us into this fix and have no solution but to bail themselves out and let the devil catch the hindmost. And that Trump is going to be the tribune of the people and run as a populist and a nationalist. And we're going to simplify this campaign to 3 basic buckets. Number one, we're going to stop mass illegal immigration and limit legal immigration to get our sovereignty back and to protect our workers. Protect our workers against mass illegal immigration that has an unlimited pool of labor to compete against them and destroys the schools and destroys the healthcare system. And we're going to limit legal immigration so that finally American citizens can start to get high value-added technology jobs. Number two, we're going to bring manufacturing jobs back, and we're going to bring manufacturing jobs back from China. And number three, we're going to get out of these pointless foreign wars that are bleeding us out. On November 9th at 2:30 in the morning, Donald Trump was elected president-elect of the United States. I told him for the whole time, you go on this path, metaphysical certitude, including on Billy Bush weekend. On Billy Bush weekend, I said, they don't care. We're going around the table, and guys are saying, drop out, go in 60 minutes. I said, they don't care. They don't care. Hillary Clinton on September 10th had named him. The contempt she holds for fellow Americans. On September 10th, on Wall Street, before Barbara Streisand sings to an elite group of swells that were going to raise $5 million for her campaign, which is $2.2 billion, all the money they threw in. She gets up and in prepared remarks, not off the top of her head, prepared remarks, she refers to half of the Trump electorate as deplorables and irredeemable. From a Democrat, working class people, Reagan Democrats, deplorable, irredeemable. because that's what they think. Remember, if you own intellectual property, if you own the control of the manufacturing assets, it's absolutely logical to ship the production overseas, to outsource it. You don't care about these people, they don't matter. They don't matter how they get along. The basis of populism and economic nationalism is different than the Austrian School of Economics. People and societies are more than mathematics. People and societies are more than just units of production. It's a civic society that underpins this. J.D. Vance, who wrote Hillbilly Elegies, reminded me of these great studies done at MIT and Harvard that showed that the factories that moved to China, the jobs and billets that went with them, is exactly where the opioid crisis today. When we fight for tariffs, we're just not fighting for the economy of jobs to come back. We're fighting for dignity. We're fighting for self-worth. And yes, things may cost a little more money. Is that the end of the world? Is it the end of the world if wages rise? If Wall Street goes crazy, we got to go to the Fed. The worst thing, wages are rising. Let's increase interest rates. Remember, economic nationalism, and this is why I've given this speech and this part of it 100 times, and the opposition party media is too gutless to report on it because it cuts to the heart of the globalist agenda. Economic nationalism doesn't care about your color, your race, your ethnicity, your religion, your gender. It doesn't care about your sexual preference. It doesn't care about any of that. It just cares about one thing in America, that you're a citizen of the United States of America. If you're a citizen, you're going to get a better deal because you deserve a better deal. Because you've been paying, and the generations that came before you have been paying for this apparatus. And you've been paying with your treasure, and you've been paying with your blood. Yeah, Trump's a disruptor.
15 minutes.
Economic nationalism. I'm going to take a couple minutes of Lanny's rebuttal. Economic nationalism has already proven its work. It's already proven by the 3% growth we have in the economy. It has proven it by historic low unemployment among black Americans, 15 or 20-year unemployment numbers, low unemployment as Hispanic. Wages are rising among the working class because we start to put a premium to come to the United States and sell your products. What they really hate Trump about, and we'll talk more in the question and answers, is the fetish of the post-war international rules-based order. That is a collection from Western Europe and the EU through the Persian Gulf to the South China Sea to the Northwest Pacific. It is a series of commercial relationships, trade deals, capital markets, and alliances or national security transactions or deals. The United States pays $1 trillion a year for that. Our budget's not $780 billion. That's what just passed. You add in intelligence, you add in everything. You're fully loaded, it's $1 trillion. You know why? We underwrite the whole thing. You were so eloquent in your opening and said how appreciative you are. Well, show me some appreciation. Act like an ally and not like a protectorate. We have protectorates in NATO. We have protectorates in the Persian Gulf. We have protections in the littoral nations of the South China Sea. We have protectorates in the Northwest Pacific. Every nation, virtually, we're upside down on trade. We're upside down on the commercial relationships. We underwrite the security with our tax dollars, and more importantly, it's the deplorable sons and daughters in the Hindu Kush, on the ships in the South China Sea, and manning the front line of the 28,000 troops in Korea. I'm come from a blue-collar Democratic family. I'm a former naval officer. My daughter's a West Point graduate and fought with the 101st Airborne in Iraq. And we're nothing extraordinary. We're just average Americans. It's time for our allies to step up. Do you know how demeaning it is to talk to Europe, being given World War I and World War II end the Cold War. You know how demeaning it is, particularly for veterans, to have to sit here with a cup in a hand and ask Germany, would you please pay your 2%? The entire NATO can't deliver, what, 3 combat divisions? You're so worried about Russia. You're so worried about Russia. But then worry about it. Worry about the tanks coming across the Fulda Gap. Worry about coming through the Ukraine. But if you're going to worry, pay for it. You should be ashamed of yourselves. And they should be particularly ashamed of yourself that Donald Trump looks like the bad guy. Donald Trump is the one that's trying to make the partnership work. You're not supposed to be a protectorate. You're supposed to be a partner. And you're supposed to be a partner where it counts. If you think Russia is your biggest threat, I got news for you. That's not in your top 5 threats. Syria alone almost broke up the European Union. Do you understand what would happen if Egypt was to collapse? Do you understand what's going to happen when China, as the East India Company in sub-Saharan Africa, starts forcing people up through North Africa to Europe? That's a crisis. The collapse of Egypt is a crisis that'll make Syria pale in comparison. I know it'll come across as a little heated.
20 minutes.
And here's why. Thank you. Nothing could be more important. And if we don't hold together the Judeo-Christian West in a united front as real partners, not with some American big brother and some protected, as real allies, the dark valley we're going to go through in the next 10 years with China and Persia and Turkey, the dark valley we're going to go through is going to have a very bad conclusion. There's no need for that. And if you follow what Donald Trump's doing and his courage in doing it, I think we'll be much better off as a society, a culture, and an alliance. Thank you very much. Thank the people of Prague. Really appreciate it.